Ray, Judah, and John Scott. Let's have an introduction by Danica.
Okay, so West Coast Guardians of the Water, John W. Scott, co-founder of Clean Water Initiative of Florida, and Ray Judah, former Lee County Commissioner and current coordinator of Florida Coastal and Ocean Coalition.
Good morning, or afternoon, yes. I would first like to thank Mr. Houston Cypress and Love the Everglades movement for planning this landmark event. And I would like to also thank the other speakers here today. It's my humble pleasure to share the stage with you. Thank you. My name is John W. Scott. Some of you might know me better by my Facebook handle, which is Green Guy. And I'd like to begin by telling you briefly why I'm here today. I'm a native Floridian, born and raised in Miami, and I've lived in Florida my whole life, calling Fort Myers my home since 1979. And I've witnessed drastic changes in all facets of this state, and I'm here to tell you, as far as the environment is concerned, they are not for the better. Shortly after the Orlando Clean Water Summit in November of 2013, my wife and I, Ruth, founded the Clean Water Initiative of Florida, an advocacy group dedicated to preserving Florida's natural resources through public education, awareness, and policy change. Although we've been environmentalists for all of our adult lives, we decided it was time to get involved and really do something. Sorry about that. We've learned in a very short time, working with and learning from some incredible folks from all over the state of Florida, that our waterways and everything and everyone that relies upon them are under attack. In fact, it's an overwhelming assault that never seems to stop. The images on the screen will tell you everything that you need to know, so you can just watch those while I'm talking, and that kind of tells the story while I'm telling you another part of the story. The Caloosahatchee on the river on the west coast and the St. Lucie River and the Indian River Lagoon on the east coast have been absolutely devastated by relentless polluted discharges from Lake Okeechobee, up to 6 billion gallons per day at the peak of the 2013 rainy season. This has resulted in historic mortality events for all types of marine life, including manatees, dolphins, sea turtles, pelicans, fish, and oyster beds. In 2013, we set a record. Not a good one, mind you. 830 manatee deaths in the state of Florida, the most since record keeping began. And in the Indian River Lagoon on the east coast alone, 80 dolphins died in a mortality event over there. Most certainly from the algae blooms and deadly toxins created by the aforementioned runoff from Lake Okeechobee. This is not the way nature intended it to be. In fact, it wasn't this way until recently, when some developers and agriculture politicians and the Army Corps of Engineers decided that other interests were more important than the welfare and natural flow of the Everglades and Lake Okeechobee. Our ecosystems are being laid to waste, yet somehow politics and profits have jumped ahead of our natural resources as top priorities. This is shameful, and we all know that it's shameful, yet voters still elect many of the same folks whose goal is to maintain the status quo. You know the status quo. Peripheral, fringe solutions that nibble at the edges of the problem instead of getting to the heart of it. And we've had more than one well-studied, analyzed proposal to send the water south for decades. Yet after all these years, we're still getting the same old lip service about sending the water south with nothing to show for it. Now, I've spoken to several local and state politicians, and when I press them about showing leadership on sending the water south, what do I get? Predictable canned responses. Like, that's a long-term project, not a short-term project. Or, I'm not sure about the feasibility of it. Let's study it more. Those responses work great as sound bites to deflect blame or to pacify inquiring minds, but they never fix the problem. Billions of dollars in proposed solutions are on the table that won't come close to resolving the Lake discharge problems, and they'll be applauded, hailed as true leadership. But what happens if you try to implement a solution that will completely resolve the problem? Crickets. Politicization, vilification, misinformation, procrastination. Polluters and special interests always get their way because they always have more money. The agricultural industry spent billions of dollars on campaign contributions and lobbyists over the years, resulting in absolute power at all levels of government. So much power, in fact, that no agency or bought politician dares step out of line and act against those interests, no matter what the effect on our natural resources may be. Even the smallest changes seem to be nearly impossible to achieve. Public safety just no longer trumps profit. Now, I have nothing against responsible agriculture, which means being good stewards to our natural resources. But if anyone in this room dumps toxic waste into our waterways, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get fined or thrown in jail or both, right? Am I correct? Right. The agriculture industry, however, can backpump billions of gallons of polluted runoff into Lake O annually with no penalty. What we've witnessed in this state for decades is anything but responsible. In fact, it's criminal. Privatized profits and socialized cleanup is not by any measure fair to our natural resources or the taxpayers of the state. And I think it's worth noting that we have a $65+ billion per year tourism industry, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows. And the only thing required to make sure that it keeps thriving is to preserve our natural resources. That's not too difficult. It's not rocket science, as somebody said earlier. We must keep relentless pressure on local, state, and federal officials and agencies. We must demand that they do their job and protect our natural resources as outlined in the state constitution. Come election time, we must remember, if you want these issues to be addressed properly, you must elect people who will do so. Thanks to each and every one of you for being here today. Together we can make a difference. And now that I've touched on the dire problems facing Florida's waterways, my partner in this presentation will present the solutions, real solutions to these problems. I'm honored to introduce a man that I've admired for many years and proud to call my friend, have learned so very much from, and am thrilled to be working with this important cause. He served for 24 years on the Lee County Board of County Commissioners and is currently the coordinator for Florida Coastal and Ocean Coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a loud welcome for Ray Judah.
Flipping up to the, Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, we're good. First of all, this is not an enviable, excuse me. If you could just stay up here and operate that phone, thank you. Not an enviable task to be standing up here between your growling stomachs and lunch. But I appreciate your patience. I want to certainly thank Mr. Cypress and the Miccosukee Tribe for the opportunity today and for all of you to be here. I think we can all learn from each other. The previous presenter mentioned that this is not rocket science to restore the Everglades, and I couldn't agree more. And if you could please go to the next slide. I think this visual image really helps to explain matters, because if you look at Lake Okeechobee as literally in medical terms, the liquid heart of the South Florida ecosystem, you recognize that entire vast expanse of the Everglades agriculture area directly south of the lake, the 700,000 acres of primarily sugarcane fields, severs that artery, or severs that hydrological connection that once existed between the lake and the Everglades. But it also has caused a number of other problems, and that is that much of this water that used to flow to the south is now redirected, and has been redirected for several decades, to the Caloosahatchee on the west coast and St. Lucie on the east coast. I did want to point out while I have this slide here, because a lot of the elected officials, the South Florida Water Management District, the Corps of Engineers, have tried to work out ways in which to enhance and restore the Lake Okeechobee watershed, to restore the Everglades and to prevent the adverse impacts to our coastal estuaries, Indian River Lagoon and also Estero Bay and Pine Island Sound on the west coast. And if you look at that slide there, you can see where the Tamiami Trail is and Alligator Alley. You can certainly see the water conservation area 3A and 3B. You see that levee that separates 3A and 3B. Well, when you think about the Central Everglades Planning Project, which the Everglades Foundation is strongly supporting funding for, about $2.6 billion, there's a lot of good components to that project. And of course, they're fighting to try to get funding either through the Water Resource Reform and Development Act or find other ways to obtain those dollars from the state or the federal government. But it's a noble pursuit, and certainly some of the positive components are to remove some of that levee between the water conservation area 3A and 3B to allow for water to flow to the south. Also a seepage barrier that would prevent flooding of the development that you see to the east of the water conservation areas. And then of course, as you had heard earlier, some $90 million that the state is contributing in joint partnership with the Department of Interior to build some 2.6 miles of bridging on the Tamiami Trail, again, to allow for the water to flow to the south. So those are strong attributes of the Central Everglades Planning Project, but that is not in any way the answer to restoring the Everglades and, again, protecting our coastal estuaries on the South Florida. And I say that because if you talk to the Corps of Engineers, they will tell you the numbers. And this is what's important, is you have to look at the water budget for the Lake Okeechobee watershed. Only 68 billion gallons of water, or roughly 210,000 acre-feet of water from the lake, will end up, through the Central Everglades Planning Project, flow to the south. If you think that's a lot of water, think again, because last year alone, over 500 billion gallons of water was in the lake, most of that being sent to the west and to the east. If you could please... Okay, this to me is a picture that's better than 1,000 words, because what you have here is a photograph that overlays an aerial of the topography there that was done by the South Florida Water Management District. This was taken last year. As you know, we were just inundated with heavy rains, and what we have here is the teal or turquoise that you see color in the Lake Okeechobee, over to the west, Pine Island Sound, Sanibel, up there in the Indian River Lagoon to the east, and then also the water conservation areas. And you notice that one area between the lake and the water conservation areas is high and dry. Well, that's the Everglades agricultural area. The reason that's high and dry is because what I think is the 11th commandment for the South Florida Water Management District. Thou shalt keep the water at 18 to 24 inches below ground to provide optimum growing conditions for the sugarcane industry, and to the detriment of all the other areas within the ecosystem. So in other words, no matter what the seasonal fluctuation, that water is going to go elsewhere, primarily to the coastal estuaries on the west and east coast of South Florida. Therein lies the problem, because of a water resource mandate by the South Florida Water Management District to provide for optimum growing conditions for the sugar industry to the detriment of the entire ecosystem. If you could point to the next one. Now here again, if you look at the water budget, and it's a pretty busy slide, but I'm going to try to draw out some numbers here that you can see pretty easily. You see on the west coast there, at S77, the 9,300 cubic feet per second, that equates to 6 billion gallons a day. And as you probably have read or heard, you've already seen today, that the C43 reservoir through the Water Resource Reform and Development Act is to be built on the west coast in Henry County, where in which water is to be stored and to help alleviate the massive releases from Lake Okeechobee. And while that is one tool in the toolbox, what you need to understand is, if the C43 reservoir does ever at some time get built, it will store 170,000 acre-feet of water, or 55 billion gallons of water. And I just mentioned earlier, 500 billion gallons of water flowed from the lake, most of it to the west coast. So if 9,300 cubic feet per second equates to 6 billion gallons a day, how long will it take to fill up 55 billion gallons in a reservoir? Well, about 9 days. And we had 4 months of discharge from the lake to the coastal estuaries of 7,400 cubic feet per second, close to 5 billion gallons a day for 4 months. So that C43 reservoir will be a tool in the toolbox, but it'll only take care of about 10% of the runoff from the lake. And it does not have a water quality component, so you still have problems with nitrogen and phosphorus, creating adverse harm by causing harmful algae blooms, red tides, and fish kills. Within the lake itself, you can see the going over to the east coast there, to the St. Lucie, about 20% of the discharge, and about 400,000 acre feet. What people don't realize, though, is none of that lake water is going into the C44 reservoir. That's going to take agricultural drainage. So that's not alleviating the problem with the discharge from the lake. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at the water budget, we recognize that all these projects that our legislature and the district are looking at trying to put in place to basically help improve the watershed will have a minimal effect. And really what we need to look at is the next slide, where you can see a proposed flowway in the Everglades agricultural area. You all heard of Plan 6. Plan 6 is the fix. And to think or to try to act otherwise is foolhardy, because what we absolutely need is, one, a spillway on the south end of the lake to provide for excessive releases of high water to protect the integrity of the dike and people's lives and people's property, instead of using the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie as the relief valves. So first of all, provide that spillway, then have the state purchase the necessary 50,000 acres of land that will combine with the publicly owned land, so we'll have 100,000 acres of land in which we can actually provide enough land to store, treat, and convey the water, over 100,000 acres of land directly to the south, where we can protect and nurture the Everglades with the proper quantity and quality of water and alleviate the adverse impacts to the estuaries on the west and east coast of South Florida. So I would implore you, what we really need to pursue is give us this day our flowway and get on the page in which we can finally provide an important improvement to this patient, the Everglades, by being able to provide that artery, that hydrological connection from the lake to the Everglades. Thank you very much. I understand you have a question, Laura? Charlie Chris, as you know, worked out an agreement with U.S. Sugar to buy the entire 187,000 acres before he left office. Ultimately, the state acquired 26,000 acres, but that's all over by the Loxahatchee area, which is fine. They'll work as a stormwater treatment area. Will he support this flowway concept? He certainly supported when he was governor. I certainly believe that if he is to be elected as governor again, that he will resurrect this idea to be able to provide the meaningful solution of a flowway south from the lake to the Everglades National Park. Thank you.
Also, if you'd like to know more about what Ray and I are doing in our organizations, you can look us up on Facebook, Clean Water Initiative of Florida and Florida Coastal and Ocean Coalition, and also on our websites, which are on there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you guys have a booth over in the next room, right? Good. Ladies and gentlemen,